I didn't realize you have to buy all this crap. I mean, it's not crap, it's school supplies. I guess that's a good thing.
Who needs an education? What is this show about again? Welcome to Hello PhD, a podcast for scientists and the people who love them. Today on the show, we propose some changes to the graduate-mentor relationship that will make it slightly less dysfunctional. Stay with us.
And we're back. This is Hello PhD, episode 55. I'm Joshua Hall.
And I'm Daniel Arneman.
And we'll discuss the human side of science and life in the lab. Hey there, Dan.
Hey, Josh, what's happening?
Not much. Have you been watching any Rio 2016?
Zero. I have
Seriously?
watched zero. You know how I feel about sports ball.
Yeah, that's true. I'm not surprised.
Yeah, you shouldn't be surprised. I did read about Ryan Lochte, and I'm trying to figure out what happened there.
I think what happened was whatever was in the hair dye. Have you seen his hair?
No, I haven't seen
Oh, well,
it.
you haven't watched it either. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
He has
I heard people talk about it, though. That's my connection to the real world right now.
Yeah, I can't tell if his friends directly played a joke on him by spiking his shampoo, or if they played a joke on him by telling him it looked good after he did it himself.
Is it a color? What is it?
It's kind of white. It
Yeah.
sort of looks like if your grandpa tried to have a hip hairstyle or something.
Oh, I thought that was a swim cap when you first pulled up that picture.
Yeah.
Like I saw it from a distance, and I thought it was a swim cap.
No, that's his hair color.
Neat. It's like bluish.
I think maybe he knew he wasn't going to win gold, so he just went for the silver.
Oh, man.
Dan, we got a good beer tonight. It's been hot lately. I don't know where our listeners are right now, but where we have been, it has been hot. I'm ready for fall. These over 90-degree days are wearing on me.
So are you going to cool things off here?
I am. So I feel like on days like today where the weather is hot, these aren't the days you want a stout or a porter or a high-gravity IPA. This is when you want something light, something refreshing, something crisp. So we're going to have, I think, our first ever Pilsner on the show.
That has to be the case because I usually forbid the drinking of Pilsners in my presence, but okay, let's try it.
Yeah, so this is one that I enjoyed. I mentioned last show that my wife's go-to beer on the beach was the watermelon
Yeah, it's
lager.
tasty.
Mine was this Oscar Blues Mama's Little Yella Pils. So this is a Pilsner style from Oscar Blues in Brevard, North Carolina. We're not pouring this in a glass. We're going straight from the can. This is an ice-cold can. What do you think?
Yeah, I like it. It's actually got some flavor. I'm surprised.
No, it's full of flavor. And I think this is what I've discovered recently, Dan. So you're probably like me. I always would avoid the Pilsner because when I think Pilsner, what do you think about?
I think of like a nearly transparent clear beer that's served in a super tall glass that tastes like water. This has got way more hop and bitterness than I expected.
No, I looked up the marketing speak for this one from Oscar Blues. And one of the things they say is this is a small batch version of the beer that made Pilsen, Czech Republic famous. So Pilsner originated from
Is that a
the
word
town of
origin, Josh?
Pilsen.
Whoa.
Yeah, maybe that could
Pilsner
be a future
word
word.
origin.
Unlike mass market Pilsners diluted with corn and rice, Mama's is built with 100% pale malt, German specialty malts and hops.
See, I was going to ask that. I expected a corn flavor. For some reason, I associate the like very yellow beers with a corn.
That's what we're used to with all these American style lagers.
We have corn. You got to put
throw
some
corn in there, but
Yeah.
this is a legit Pilsner. So
I do have one last question about the name of the beer. Is
Sure.
it Mama's Little Yellow Pills? Like, does Mama have a drug problem that we should be talking to her about? She's addicted to Nuprin or something?
it could be. I don't know what's the yellow pills. I'm more familiar.
Nuprin, you remember the ads, Little Yellow Different? No?
I don't remember that.
Okay.
Dan, back to school is upon us, which, well, actually, for me, my daughter started kindergarten, so I'm in the back to school.
Used to be the worst time of year when you're a kid in school. For parents, it's like, yes.
I didn't realize you have to buy all this crap. I mean, it's not crap. I guess it's school supplies.
Yeah.
I guess that's a good thing.
Who needs an education? What is this show about again?
Hello, kindergarten.
Yeah.
You know, I was thinking all the shop. I was on Amazon doing all this back to school shopping, and I'm sure they are a cash cow right now. With
Oh, they know
back to
exactly
school.
what you need before you ask, I'm sure.
But, you know, I wanted to mention here at the top of the show, we usually throw this at the end of the show. We've had we're really thankful for all the people who've been clicking through our Amazon banner on our website. And so if you're doing some Amazon shopping and you want to support Hello PhD, you can do so without actually giving us any money. So you can go to hellophd.com, make sure your ad blocker is off or you whitelist our site or you won't see this. Click on the Amazon link. It'll take you to Amazon. Do your shopping like normal. You'll pay the same price you normally would, but we get a little kickback that helps us with the cost of hosting the show.
And on that note, can I bring you some feedback on last week's or 2 weeks ago's show?
Please do. This was about the 5-year PhD, I guess.
Yeah, I love, we consider this really a conversation with everybody out there. And having these 2-week episodes has given us more time to get feedback, which I think is fantastic. So last week we talked about the 5-year PhD.
And I have to say, I kind of braced myself for pushback because I feel like this was kind of a controversial stance to take.
Yeah, I'm going to filter out all the people who, wished you harm, but I'm going to just read a couple that were more constructive.
Grad students should stay there for 8 years like I did.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, what did we get back?
So Ross had some good feedback. He had 2 issues with the 5-year PhD.
What has he been up to since Friends?
Oh my gosh, different Ross.
Okay.
There's more than one. So the first benefit he saw with the, quote, flexible format, which is basically you finish whenever you're done, is the upside of that, which is you could work really hard, get very lucky, and be done in 3 years. Did you ever know anybody that did that, Josh? I knew like 1, maybe 2 people.
Yeah, and I mean, I work a lot with students now, so I kind of have a more widespread view of all the grad students, and it does happen. I would say, out of 80 students, yeah, there's probably 2 or 3 that do finish under 5 years.
Yeah, and it's rare, but it does, it's a motivation, I suppose. And maybe it's not something to design an entire program around, but if you kept those people for 5 whole years, even though they had kind of finished everything, that's one downside. The other is, he thought it was really important to be able to maintain your funding in the job and the financial support while you look for jobs. So if you basically get done in a weak job market and you are just out because it's year 5, which happens recently, right? You've got nowhere to go. But if you can be more flexible about how much time you're there, maybe you get done a little bit early, but you stay on until you find a job, or maybe it takes you an extra year, but you're not really in a hurry because there's no jobs available. Having that flexibility might help you out.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And that's one thing, maybe that I wasn't clear about last week is I have nothing against people of their own decision staying longer. Like I said, maybe you're in a situation like Ross brings up where your next job's not lined up, and it is nice that you're not just booted out the door as soon as you're done. Maybe you do need to finish or want to finish up some paper you're working on. I certainly think there should be built in a mechanism to do that post-graduation. I think the main thing I worry about is the situation that can happen far too often where someone's ready to go
and they're not allowed to go. Yeah.
They can't go, or else they leave empty-handed. And
his solution that he's proposed is, a culture in the department that would finish everybody in 5 years, but had like a firm cap, a cutoff date at 6. So it's kind of in line with what you're talking about, except instead of a definite 5-year, it's do your best to get out in 5, and regardless, 6 is it.
Yeah, I think that's a great compromise.
Yeah. So something to think about. I just wanted to read one more piece of feedback from Sherry.
And thanks, Ross, for writing in. We paraphrased a little bit what he said, but he had some great feedback, and so thanks for that.
Let me just give a couple examples from what Sherry said. And the reason I want to read this is because she had some of the specific examples that I was after last week, where it's like, what is it we want graduate students to do, and how will we train them to do it? So Sherry wrote, one of the best ways to limit the time to degree is to be clear as to the expectations of students from the first day. What do we want graduate students to know and to be able to do upon completion of the program? In a modern PhD, the program may want students to develop a certain standard of skills in speaking to a lay audience, so that every student would need to complete a 3-minute thesis. If the program also wants to make sure that students who graduate understand open science protocols, all students' writing would include the data, links, etc., which would be taught and imparted as an expectation. So I really love that because it was specific examples of how you would instill these skills and test them.
What I think is cool about that is, a lot of these things she mentions are specific skills that would be great for students coming out of their PhD to possess. But really the way we do it now, individuals may or may not build these skills. They may get this in their training. They may not. So
some do, some don't. There's no
really,
standard.
Yeah, I mean, if we think about like
established point.
sort of the main currency or the main outcome for graduation is usually papers, right? There's a paper
it's-
requirement, but there are all these other skills, and papers are important, right? I mean, they are symbolic of work accomplished, et cetera, et cetera. But I would say the whole range of skills that are important to be successful in science, many of those skills are not at all assessed or demonstrated in writing and publishing a paper. In some ways, what Sherry's pointing out is if we are talking about modernizing the PhD, not only are we talking about maybe taking away certain requirements, but maybe adding on certain requirements that really do fit into today's world, skills that are important in the job market, whether you're in academia or industry or somewhere else, that we're really not assessing. And by not assessing them, we're probably not building into the training opportunities for individuals to get these skills.
Yep, and I think what she says is start with the end in mind, figure out the outcome, and then we can design some tests and some methods basically to get there. So I think that's great.
That's great feedback. Thanks, Sherry.
So we love hearing from you. Obviously, we're excited to have the feedback. And if you have some thoughts on the 5-year PhD episode, please do write them in and we can read them on the show.
Second to that. All right. So let's move on to part 2 of the Modern PhD series. So this week, Dan, what I wanted to talk about is the very important advisor-student relationship. So you would agree with me, Dan, that maybe the most critical, and actually it's funny, the graduate students across at least our country, maybe the world, they're starting grad school in these weeks.
They are?
Yeah, so all of our grad students started this week.
Wow. You better go back and listen to episodes, people.
Yeah.
There's a lot in there.
Yeah, we should like put together, here's your survival guide. Are you starting grad school this week? Listen to these 3
Yeah,
things.
exactly.
But I had the opportunity to speak to this large group of graduate students on their first day of school. So I could talk about some of these things. But one of the things I said that I truly believe is probably the most important decision they will make this year as first-year graduate students is choosing a research advisor, choosing a lab.
Choosing rotations or just like the final
decision of the lab they choose, because as you know, Dan, I mean,
it's
really,
a marriage.
your
It's a
whole
marriage.
experience really rises and falls on the functionality of that relationship.
Yeah, all the truly horrifying bad lab experiences seem to come down to that advisor, that supposed to be mentor. So, I mean, we have the stories of people who spill radiation, and that's sort of tragic and comical at the same time. But the places it can really go wrong are when you get a bad advisor.
Absolutely. And so, I've been brainstorming a little bit about ways we're talking about modernizing the PhD. We're talking about really bringing it up to speed, making PhD training work the best it can work for the current day. And one of those is, if that relationship is that critical, we should be really putting a lot of time and thought into nurturing that relationship and helping that relationship have the greatest chance for success as possible, if everything really does rise and fall on that relationship.
So what do you have for us? That's not easy.
It's not easy.
I feel like we come into graduate school, we read, I don't know if this still happens, but you either go to the website or you get a list of people in your department and the research they're doing and whether or not they're taking students. And you sit down with it and you read the headline, are they working on a cool protein or is it Drosophila or whatever? And then if that catches your interest, you read some of the description. You might jump down to the bottom to see if they've published in Nature recently, and then you're moving on to the next one. And so I feel like I'm choosing my research experience based on the science I think is cool, not so much about the mentor.
I think the dead horse we've certainly beaten at this point is that's not necessarily the best way to do things, right? You want to do science that's cool, but you don't want to overlook red flags in the lab situation or the mentorship or lack thereof.
But there's no box off to the right-hand side that says, I'm going to be a micromanaging beast that never lets you take a vacation and
That's
yells
true.
at you each day in the hallway.
That's
if,
true.
If that were on there, I think that would help, but it's not.
It would help. Although I would say if you're in a program, as many are, where you get to do rotations for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, I mean, that's a really great opportunity. It's a 6-week test drive before you buy the car. That's pretty good. So
That's the honeymoon phase, though. So what do
It's
you
true.
have to repair the entire system? Because
So-
I think we're going to make mistakes. You're going to miss some of the warning signs that this person is a nightmare.
So I think Dan, nurturing this mentor-student relationship is a 4-way street.
Oh my gosh, that's not even possible. There would be so many collisions.
Maybe that's the problem. But I think there are four different directions we have to approach this.
Is there like a yield? Is it a roundabout? What are we talking?
Well, let me get into this. So I think nurturing this relationship requires something from the student, from the graduate student, from the mentors themselves, from the institution, the environment in which the relationship is happening, and from the funding level, or from the funding institutions who are interested in this. In this case, I'll be speaking mostly about the NIH or NSF, but I think there are ways that the relationship can be improved and nurtured from that level too. So I think all 4 of these levels, there's suggestions for ways we can improve these relationships.
So it's not you, it's me, but it's actually all of us.
It's all of us
Yeah.
together, right? And so the first thing is, let's just start with what you can do and your mentor can do. We'll start at the nucleus, right? So the first thing I want to point out is there actually are resources out there for being the best mentor you can be and being the best mentee you can be. And this is the Wisconsin Mentor Training Corps. These guys were given, I think, like $2 million or something by the NIH to basically serve as this mentor training corps for this thing called the National Research Mentoring Network. What's important is one of the things they've done is they've put together all of these resources and put a lot of time and thought into this whole thing we're talking about, into how to improve that relationship. And they've made it all available on this website. We'll link this in the show notes. But there's a lot of good stuff here if people use it. And I think what's cool about this, I spent some time on this website. I've been on it off and on in the past, but as we were researching for this show, I really dug in a little bit and was impressed by what's there. They've divided these resources into 4 different categories depending on where in your mentoring relationship you are, where in your training. And so it goes anywhere from selection. So how do you decide who to enter into a mentoring relationship with in the first place?
Oh, and that is, as a mentor, I should choose these students coming up.
Yeah. And what's cool is one of the documents they've put together is this assessing fit checklist. And what's cool about it is this checklist, you actually, I think in a perfect world, you and your potential mentor would both fill this out and look from both directions. Is this a good match? Right?
Yeah.
Is this...
How cool it would be to have an adult conversation with another human being that was like, hey, these are the things that are really important to me on this checklist, but it looks like they're not that important to you. So good luck.
Yeah, and hey, that's cool. Like,
no hard feelings. Yeah, glad we avoided that.
Yeah, and you know what, Dan? When I was reading about this checklist, where literally you and your potential mentor both answer this set of questions, literally these honest questions, I kind of cringe a little bit at the thought of like the openness of having this conversation up front with a potential mentor.
Somebody that you may not know very well, yeah.
But then I was like, well, why is that? Like, this is a professional relationship, right? And we're just trying to suss out, is this a good fit for us to continue in this professional way? Why does it feel so personal?
Yeah, it'd be a better way to start a long-term mentor-mentee relationship to make sure that you couldn't talk to each other, that it was really awkward, that you felt embarrassed by even mentioning that you had goals for the lab or feelings about it.
Yeah,
better just to like grin and bear it. That's a better relationship.
7 miserable years saved me 15 minutes conversation.
I just launched eHarmony for lab mentor-mentee relationships. So answer this 42 question checklist and we'll match you with the perfect mentor.
Maybe that's our future business plan. We shouldn't talk about it on here. Somebody else might.
That's true. Now it's unpatentable.
So anyway, this mentor core, though, they go beyond just the selection process, because I know many of our listeners too. That ship has sailed, right? They're already in a lab. And so they break it
Or
down.
they've taken on a student.
Or they've taken on a student. We have faculty listeners too. So they go beyond selection. They talk about alignment. So once you're paired, how do you make sure you start off on the same page, right? So you're early in that relationship. Then there's cultivation. How do you make sure you stay on the same page as you move forward so that goals are met? So, the honeymoon phase, as you said, is over. And then last, and this is so important and often overlooked, closure. So once the goals are met, how do you decide how and if the relationship will proceed? Once it's time to go, how do you close that relationship down?
What you don't want to do is wake up at midnight and find your old PI digging through your garbage for like mementos of you. That would be a bad closure.
You speak from personal experience.
You never know.
So anyway, I think this is really cool, but I would advise everybody out there, whether you are a mentor or a mentee, and I want to say too, this is a cool resource, even if you're not a faculty member, but let's say you're a senior grad student or a postdoc who's doing some mentoring of an undergraduate or of a junior graduate student, or you're interested in being a mentor someday, to actually think about yourself.
I've talked about some of my undergrad helpers on the show before, and I would, if I had a checklist, we would have been done on day one.
And hey, that might have been better for everybody.
I would love to help you, but my checklist says I can't. Sorry.
So anyway, that's one thing, Dan. I think just it boils down to being more intentional about starting a mentor-mentee relationship, or even as an individual who's part of that relationship, like realizing it is a relationship that needs to be nurtured and tended to from time to time.
Yep. So we can all get better at this. This is two of the 4 parts. I suspect not everybody in those relationships is going to be willing to improve their mentoring or menteeing. So what comes next? Because I might, as a student, be really excited about finding alignment and having a nice closure. But what if my PI isn't?
Right. So I think that brings up a couple of other things. So first, actually, one more thing I want to say to all of the mentees out there, and that is, make sure you have realistic expectations for what your primary research advisor can reasonably provide you, right? And so what I mean is, yes, that relationship is probably the most important relationship you're training, but it may be unreasonable to expect that person can provide all the mentorship that you need, right?
That person may run the lab you work in, but may not be your mentor.
Yeah, and they may be, and maybe they are a great mentor for the nitty-gritty of your research project, your specific research aims. But, maybe your career that you're interested in, they have very little knowledge of. Well, that's not the best person to be your career mentor, right? Or maybe maybe you have some personal issues that really do impact your training and your thoughts about your training. Maybe there's somebody else you need to seek out as a mentor for that aspect of how your personal life impacts your training, and on, right? So I think what I would like everybody out there to do, and especially this is even better if you're just starting grad school, but whoever you are, when you think about, don't just think about who's my mentor, but think who's my mentoring team, right? And you should be able to identify 3, 4, 5 people that you consider a mentor, meaning people out there that you trust to really help you navigate your training and your career, maybe in very different ways, that together really give you this complete set of mentoring that you need to move on.
Now, would you formalize that? Because the PI-student relationship is codified in graduate school. This is the person that forms the central part of your committee, and you work with them day to day. Is there any way to kind of formalize the idea of multiple people are actually supporting me? I know we've talked about the director of graduate studies being a resource, but what would you do there?
I think you can. I think it's sort of a fundamental change of the way we think about mentorship in graduate school. And again, this goes along with modernizing the PhD, right? Moving beyond that one mentor model. So yeah, I think in some ways, let's say I'm interested in science writing, and I know that's what I want to do with my career. Well, maybe I don't have someone in my life that is knowledgeable about that career path. It's perfectly okay to seek out those mentors and even meet with people and be very upfront about, I'm looking I'm looking toward building this mentorship team. And one of the key pieces for me is someone who can really give me a lot of advice and guidance in moving in this career direction. Would you be willing to do that? I think, yeah, you can be very upfront.
You don't have to hide it from your PI, like, I'm finding mentorship on the side.
Well, I don't think you necessarily have to talk to your PI, but you can. I mean, I think in some ways...
You don't want them to dig in your garbage and find out.
Well, I think in some ways it takes some pressure off of your PI because,
yeah, definitely.
You could think if you were the PI and you had a student in your tutelage who said, oh, Dr. Harneman, I really want to go on and be a consultant. Yeah. Can you help me get there?
I mean, my poor PI, I came with a list of different things I wanted to do that had nothing to do with lab. And there was the initial look of like horror and then concern, and then covering that over with okay, well, maybe I can introduce you to, somebody who can help you. But yeah, there's no way that one person could have every experience and know all of the different career paths that were open.
Oh, absolutely. And a good mentor...
You shouldn't expect that.
And a good mentor would admit that, right? When one of your mentees comes to you with a need that really you can't meet, to be very willing to say, well, I don't know the answer to this. I can't help you with this, but let me help you find somebody that can. So that's what I'm talking about. So I guess the second thing is just really seeking out multiple mentors and forming that mentorship team. All right. So that's sort of moving past what the people involved in the relationship should do. But I think there are factors in the greater environment with which that relationship happens that also could contribute to making those relationships better. And the first is at the department or university level. Okay. And one of those, I was in a conference just yesterday, and there was a conversation about tenure, and there was this kind of higher up person talking about how there needs to be changes to the way tenure works. And she used this really great analogy that was like, if you were dating, right, you were going on a first date with someone, and you had sent them a photograph so that they would be able to pick you out in the restaurant, but you sent them a photograph from high school, and you're 55 years old now.
Yeah, have you seen my LinkedIn profile? I have a picture up from 1922.
There's some faculty who are guilty of this.
Yeah.
But no, in no way would that be useful for them in the current day because things have changed so much. But that's kind of like how we do tenure the same as we've always done tenure, right? We've done graduate training. We've done this sort of mentorship relationship in the same way we've always done it. So
isn't that what tenure is, though? It's the, like, I behaved for this many years, and now I can do whatever I want.
Now it's one big party.
This is dating and then the marriage. I can leave my socks where I want to leave my socks because I have a piece of paper that says you have to stay with me.
But it doesn't mean people are happy about it.
That's true. That's very true, yeah.
So anyway, one of the things I thought about, and we've covered this ground on the show before, but I think it fits here, and that is, I think it should be easier to switch labs if it's not working out.
Easier in what way? Because I think there's nothing easy about switching labs. But what would you change that would make... That's
a good point. Maybe what I mean by easier is a more clear and defined path with less stigma.
Okay, I like the sound of that. We've heard stories from people who made that change and it was successful. So we know it is a viable solution for some people. But the stigma was very strong, and it was a very hard path to take.
Yeah, and a lot of what made it a hard path, and this is what's funny to me, because we talked to Jessica, but I've talked to numerous people who've switched labs. Invariably, they all look back and said, no, it was a great decision. It gave me a new lease on my scientific career. But one thing that none of them said was really an issue was, yeah, it took them a little extra time because they had to start over in some respect, but the worst part was just that. It was sort of fear, trepidation of dealing with this stigma of trying to switch labs, feeling like damaged goods. And that's not great. I think we should have a situation, just like we were talking about before with the checklist, where we can all be adults. We can all recognize these as professional relationships and have a clear path forward if it's mutually not the best fit. And again, this is not always like interpersonal issues, right? There can be lots of reasons why, your interests and my interests don't really align like we thought they would. Let's find somebody else where you'd be better off. I mean, that's a win-win for everybody. So I think it would be great if in graduate training more broadly, if there were just clearer mechanisms that were talked about out in the open of, hey, you know what? 3 years in, let's reassess. And
yeah, there's so many people that are feeling stuck there in a lab where they know they shouldn't be, but they don't even consider this an option because it's such a hard thing. And they might have a different hopefulness if this were a very clear path that was easy to take. Not so easy that everybody just switched labs. I don't think anybody would do that, do you?
I had this conversation about this with someone in the past, and they brought up, well, if it was more clear and defined of how to switch labs, then, students would just switch labs at the drop of a hat. And I don't think that's true.
I don't think so either. Nobody wants to start over on a project.
No, not at all. So anyway, that's one thing that I would like to see more of. And then the last thing, Dan, this is at the funding agency level. So we'll just use NIH as an example because it's relevant for us in the biomedical world. And that is one of the reasons why I think a relationship between a student and a mentor can be strained has to do a little bit with mismatched needs, mismatched expectations that really are of no fault of each of the participants, right? So if I'm a faculty member, what do I need to do for my career?
You need to publish as many papers as you can in the highest level journals.
Yeah, and obtain funding.
Money.
And once I get that funding, I need to accomplish the things that I said I was going to do on the grant. But a lot of graduate students, at least in the sciences, are paid off of these research grants, right? So if I'm a faculty member and I have this multi-year research grant for $1 million, and I'm paying these 2 grad students on this research grant, I need these grad students to do X, Y, and Z on this research grant so that I can continue receiving funding, right? I need to publish on the results from that grant, and I need the results to go a certain way with that grant.
You know what you don't need them doing? Training to be better students or going into the career that they love or...
Exactly, right. That is in opposition...
Publish.
Right, that is in opposition to the thing they're funded by, right? What that needs them to do. So I think one suggestion I would have is we've mentioned these training grants. I know you're tired of me talking about these T32 training grants, right? But these training grants, and there are a number of them out there, a lot of institutions have these training grants, but they exist just to fund trainees, right? Grad students, postdocs. And the great thing about them is it offloads trainees, at least the ones who are on these grants, from just straight research grants to training grants, which then frees students up to actually make decisions that are actually best for their training. And they're also doing research. I mean, they need to do research, be productive, but it allows faculty to utilize that money to actually get that research done without needing the graduate student to just do the research. And I don't know if I'm saying this in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, you're separating the conflict of interests so that you are paying them to be trained. And while they're being trained, they also happen to be accomplishing these other things you need to have done for your grant.
Exactly. And I think what I'm getting at by saying this is what we need to not forget is that graduate school is still school. And a graduate student is not just an employee. And the more grad students are funded on research grant dollars, they have to function more as employees than students. And that's not necessarily in the best interest of the graduate student.
Yeah, if you would like some research done, hire some research faculty. That's probably the way it should work.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then the expectations are very clear there, right? As a technician, as a research faculty member, and in some contexts, even as a postdoc. But what the graduate student is trying to accomplish and their relationship with the institution, with the university, the school they're in, should be very different, right? And so I think what I'd like to see from a funding agency standpoint is if we're going to modernize graduate training, more dollars being funneled to these training grants so that a higher proportion of trainees are being funded to be trainees and not just employees.
That makes sense. So let me recap, see what I got out of this. We've got the four-way street, right? Why did the
chicken, the treacherous four-way street.
Why did the chicken cross the four-way street, Josh? I don't either. Terrible idea.
We need a stoplight.
Yeah, you've got the trainee, you've got the advisor or mentor, you've got the department and university that those people work in, and you've got the funding agency, and everybody plays a role in how that relationship works. I think we've identified some of the ways that breaks down. We've got a few ideas for how to make it better. I would love to hear from listeners who either have experience at one of these levels where either it went really bad or maybe it went really well. Maybe you had a great experience where your department was really encouraging about changing labs. Maybe that exists somewhere. please do write to us so that we can keep this conversation going with everybody listening.
Yeah, and it would be great to hear from people at different levels, right? From the grad students, from the mentors themselves.
Yeah, would you fill out a checklist with your mentee, or would that be totally weird and you just wouldn't do it?
From Francis Collins, I mean.
Friend of the show.
Friend of the show.
We can just say that, yeah. Never heard of us. That's okay.
All right, Dan, this has been a cool discussion. Our part 2 of 3 for modernizing the PhD. I'm excited. We will have our conclusion of modernizing the PhD on our next show, where we're going to talk about moving towards team science.
Team science. All right, Josh, well, would you like to talk about an etymology puzzle?
I would love to talk about an etymology puzzle.
The clue last week was, it looks like this limestone is oozing and dripping from the roof of the cave. Did you have an idea for this one?
I have a 50-50 shot of getting this right.
Yeah, that's true.
I know that it is stalactite or stalagmite. I'm going to guess...
Do you remember which one is on the top? And which
Well, I don't. That's why I'm having trouble here, right? I'm going to guess stalactite.
It is stalactite.
Fantastic.
Stalactite has a C in it. That's how you remember it comes from the ceiling. Stalagmite grows from the ground. That's what I learned when I was in grade school or something. So stalactite is just a hanging formation of lime, basically, from the roof of a cave. It comes from the Greek stalactos, meaning dripping, oozing out in drops. There's a earlier root from Proto-Indo-European, our favorite, that means seep, drip, or drop. That word, through German, got translated into the word to urinate. So you see how this oozing, dripping kind of all comes together, doesn't it?
That's gross.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I don't know what to tell you. I think it's pretty fascinating how the word for a limestone formation and
I have
German urination kind of come at the same time.
a question. So you said this is the German word Stalin? That's Stallen.
That's right, yep.
Is that where we get stall, like in the restroom?
Like a bathroom
like
stall?
The bathroom stall, because
There's no way.
Stalin means to urinate.
Although every time I say there's no way, and then it turns out you're right. So I'll have to find out.
That's what it is. Stalin.
I thought you were going to ask about Joseph Stalin, the Russian.
That's why I wanted to point out, because I'm looking at the show notes, that it is spelled Stallen. So I thought
I'll look it up,
stall.
and you'll be right, and I'll be mad.
Fantastic.
Okay, well, here's your clue for next week, Josh. The first sheet I glued into my manuscript was this step-by-step description of how to repeat the experiment. I'll read the clue one more time. The first sheet I glued into my manuscript was this step-by-step description of how to repeat the experiment. Remember, I'm looking for a scientific word described by the clue, and once you get it, you'll find the literal meaning of that science word as a phrase in the clue itself. If you think you know the answer, email it to puzzle@hellophd.com, and I will randomly select a winner from all the correct responses and send the lucky puzzler an Amazon gift card.
All right, Dan. Well, this was a great discussion. Like we said, we want to hear from you. You can email us podcast@hellophd.com. You can send us a tweet at hellophd. You can contact us on the Facebook page, or you can actually leave a comment on the show notes page.
That is correct. People do it. We love to read them.
And those show notes are great. Dan, you write all those. They're fantastic. The best show notes I've read.
You don't read show notes.
I usually don't.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's been a great show, Dan. Thanks, as always, for stopping by. I hope you enjoyed this refreshing Pilsner from the can, Mama's Little Yellow Pills.
Yeah, I've been eating handfuls of Little Yellow Pills, too, just to, keep up with the theme.
Maybe they just take water and they dilute Little Yellow Pills.
That's not a good idea. All right, Josh, we'll see you in 2 weeks.
See you in 2 weeks.
Every bone in my body hurt. The doctor said nothing was broken. He gave me a different medicine. It's in these little yellow pills. Nuprin. Got rid of that pain. Know what else? Works great on my tough headaches.
Nuprin. It's not aspirin, not Tylenol. It's ibuprofen. 2 Nuprin stop headaches better than extra-strength Tylenol.
And Nuprin's gentler on my stomach than aspirin.
Nuprin. Little, yellow, different, better.
It even worked on my worst pain.